A 7 months pregnant wife heads to a routine checkup in her Mercedes, leaving her billionaire husband sleeping. She returns to their lavish penthouse on Park Avenue to find the locks have been changed. Her keycards are denied, the doorman won't look her in the eye, and her husband's phone goes straight to voicemail. She spends a cold, terrifying night, locked out, alone, and pregnant. The next morning it gets worse. It's not a locksmith she needs, it's a lawyer. Because the 2 men standing at her door aren't maintenance. They're from the FBI. And they have questions about her husband. The hum of the Aesop soap dispenser in the marble-clad bathroom of the Park Avenue penthouse was a familiar, comforting sound to Aurora Blackwell. It was the scent of her life geranium leaf mandarin rind, a hint of bergamot. It was the smell of Tuesday mornings, the day of her weekly prenatal checkup. At 7 months pregnant, these visits were a ritual, a quiet anchor in the whirlwind of her otherwise spectacular life. Her husband, Damien Blackwell, was still a silhouette under the fret linens in their master suite. The rising sun cast long shadows from the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting stripes across the Alexander McQueen rug. He'd been up late again, a conference call with Tokyo, another with London. Damien was the kind of man who didn't just own the world. He actively managed it, his fingers dancing across time zones, his voice a low, confident murmur that sealed multi-million-dollar deals before most of New York had its first coffee. Aurora smiled, a private, gentle thing. She ran a hand over the swell of her belly, a perfect taut globe beneath her silk robe. They were having a boy. Damien Jr. Damien had insisted with a grin that could melt glaciers. He was already planning the boy's first trip to the Monaco Grand Prix, his first custom-tailored Tom Ford suit. She dressed quietly, choosing a simple, elegant maternity dress from Hatch, pairing it with flat Jimmy Choo sandals that felt like butter on her slightly swollen feet. On her wrist, the Cartier love bracelet Damien had given her on their first anniversary felt heavy today, a solid gold manacle of their shared existence. She grabbed her Hermes Birkin, the Himalayan crocodile one, a ludicrously extravagant push present. Damien had insisted on giving her months early and slipped out, leaving a note on the Sub-Zero refrigerator. Gone for the checkup. Baby and I love you. XOE. The ride to her obstetrician on the Upper East Side was smooth, the city a blur of yellow cabs and rushing people outside the tinted windows of her Mercedes Maybach S-Class. The driver, a stoic man named Frank, navigated the traffic with practiced ease. The appointment was routine. Strong heartbeat, good growth, a little kick that the doctor, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Albright, laughed at. He's got his father's energy, she'd said. Returning an hour later, Aurora felt a sense of peace. The sun was higher now, glinting off the polished brass of the canopy at 740 Park Avenue, a building that wasn't just an address but a statement. The doorman, a familiar face she'd seen for 5 years, tipped his hat. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwell." "Morning, Thomas." The elevator, a private one that opened directly into their penthouse foyer, ascended in a silent, gilded whisper. She hummed softly, thinking about the fresh pasta she'd have their private chef, a culinary genius poached from Perse, prepare for lunch. But when she inserted her key card into the slot, the light flashed red. Denied. She frowned. That was odd. She tried it again. Red. Denied. A flicker of annoyance. Damien must have updated the security system without telling her. He was a tech fanatic, always installing the latest and greatest in home automation. She pulled out her phone to call him, but it went straight to his voicemail, the one with his crisp, professional greeting that always made her feel like she should have scheduled an appointment to speak with him. She took the elevator back down to the lobby. "Thomas, I seem to be locked out," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "My card isn't working." Thomas, who usually met her gaze with a respectful deference, suddenly seemed intensely interested in a spot on the polished marble floor. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwell. I can't help you." "What do you mean you can't help me?" "It's my apartment. Just call up to Damien." "I have instructions, ma'am," he mumbled, his face flushing. "From Mr. Blackwell. No one is to be admitted to the penthouse. No one." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. "No one, Thomas. I'm his wife. I'm pregnant with his child." Her voice trembled slightly. "This is a mistake. A misunderstanding." He wouldn't look at her. His discomfort was a physical thing, a wall between them. Panic began to bubble in her chest, hot and acidic. She tried Damien's number again. Voicemail. She called his personal assistant, a hyper-efficient woman named Chloe. "Chloe, it's Aurora. I can't get into the apartment. Is Damien there? Can you reach him?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, a beat of silence that stretched for an eternity. "Aurora," Chloe said, her voice uncharacteristically strained. I'm sorry. I can't discuss Mr. Blackwell's schedule with you." "Discuss his schedule, Chloe. What is going on? Just tell me if he's up there." "I have to go," Chloe said abruptly, and the line went dead. Now real fear began to take root. This wasn't a tech glitch. This was deliberate. She stood in the opulent lobby, the scent of fresh lilies from the grand floral arrangement, suddenly cloying, suffocating. The other residents, titans of industry and society, mavens glided past their eyes, flicking over her, with polite curiosity, sensing the disturbance in the placid waters of their exclusive world. She felt a wave of dizziness and leaned against a marble column for support. Her baby kicked a sharp, insistent reminder of his presence. She had to stay calm. For him. She tried to think. Where could she go? Her parents were in Florida, retired. Her friends. They were Damien's friends too. Couples they entertained at their Hamptons estate, people whose lives were as intricately woven with Damien's as her own. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, sitting on a bench in Central Park, watching the nannies push their expensive strollers. She called Damien's number every 15 minutes, a desperate, futile ritual. The sun began to set, casting the city in hues of orange and pink, a beautiful mocking spectacle. As darkness fell, a cold reality set in. She had nowhere to go. Her credit cards, all linked to a joint account managed by Damien's financial team, were suddenly being declined. A notification from her banking app flashed on her screen. Transaction denied. He had cut her off, completely. Pride warred with desperation. She couldn't call her friends, not yet. What would she say? My billionaire husband has locked me out of our home and frozen our assets. Can I sleep on your couch? It was unthinkable. She found a hotel, a modest one by her standards, but clean and anonymous. She paid with the emergency cash she kept in a small pocket of her Birkin, a habit from her less affluent past that Damien had always teased her about. The room was small, the bed lumpy, the sounds of the city outside, loud and intrusive. She lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, her mind a maelstrom of confusion and fear. What had she done? Had she said something wrong? Was he angry about something? It made no sense. Just yesterday, he had been tracing the curve of her belly, whispering plans for their future. Morning came grey and unforgiving. She felt hollowed out, exhausted, but a new resolve had taken hold. She would go back. She would demand answers. She checked out of the hotel and took a taxi back to Park Avenue, her Birkin bag feeling like a ridiculous prop in this new, terrifying version of her life. As she approached the building, she saw them. 2 men standing by the entrance. They were dressed in dark, conservative suits that didn't quite fit the mold of Wall Street. They had an air of authority, a stillness that was out of place in the morning rush. As she got closer, one of them looked up, his eyes sharp, analytical. He met her gaze, and her blood ran cold. He wasn't looking at her like a doorman or a resident or even a curious passerby. He was looking at her like she was a person of interest. She almost turned back, but the other man stepped forward, blocking her path. He held up a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a badge. "Aurora Blackwell," he asked, his voice calm, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. She could only nod, her throat suddenly tight. "I'm Special Agent Davies," he said, gesturing to his partner. "This is Special Agent Sterling. We're with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to ask you some questions about your husband, Damien Blackwell." The words Federal Bureau of Investigation seemed to suck all the air out of the bustling New York morning. The taxi horns, the distant wail of a siren, the chatter of pedestrians, it all faded into a dull roar. Aurora's focus narrowed to the 2 men in front of her, their bland faces now etched with a terrifying significance. "FBI," she stammered the word, feeling foreign and absurd on her tongue. "About Damien. Is he all right? Has something happened?" A new, even more terrible fear bloomed in her heart. An accident, a kidnapping. It would explain the lockout, the silence. Damien was a powerful man. He had enemies. Agent Davies, the taller of the 2, had a face that was all sharp angles and weary eyes, as if he'd seen too many of the world's dark secrets. "Your husband is safe, Mrs. Blackwell," he said, his tone giving nothing away. "We'd like to ask you to accompany us. We have a car waiting." It wasn't a request. The finality in his voice made that clear. Aurora glanced back at the imposing facade of 740 Park Avenue. Thomas the doorman was a statue in his uniform, his gaze fixed firmly on the horizon. There were no answers for her there. With a deep, shuddering breath, she nodded. "Okay." The car was a standard black sedan, the kind that blends into the city's traffic, utterly anonymous. As she slid into the back seat, Agent Sterling, a younger, stockier man with a square jaw, got in beside her. The door closed with a solid, definitive thud, sealing her in. The world she knew, the one of private drivers and Maybachs, felt 1,000,000 miles away. This was a different kind of transport, one that moved towards an unknown and likely unpleasant destination. They drove downtown, away from the gilded cage of the Upper East Side. Aurora stared out the window, her reflection a pale, ghost-like image against the passing cityscape. She clutched her Birkin bag on her lap, the crocodile skin a strange tactile reminder of a life that was rapidly evaporating. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Federal Plaza," Agent Davies replied from the front seat. "We'd just like to talk. Clear some things up." The phrase "clear some things up" sounded ominous. It was what you said before you delivered bad news. Her mind raced, trying to grasp at a plausible explanation. A tax issue. A business dispute that had gotten out of hand. Damien was aggressive, a shark in the corporate world. He pushed boundaries, bent rules. But the FBI, that was a different league entirely. The Jacob K. Javits Federal Building was a cold, imposing tower of glass and steel. They escorted her through a series of secure doors, the clicks of the locks echoing the slamming of doors in her own life. They led her to a small, windowless room, furnished with a metal table and a few hard chairs. It was the complete antithesis of her life with Damien, a world of beige and linoleum, a world without art, without comfort, without geranium-scented soap. Agent Sterling offered her a bottle of water, a small, almost comical gesture of hospitality in the stark environment. She accepted her hand, trembling as she took it. "Mrs. Blackwell." Agent Davies began sitting opposite her. He opened a file but didn't look at it. His eyes were fixed on her. "When was the last time you spoke to your husband?" "Yesterday morning," she said, her voice hoarse. "Before I left for my doctor's appointment. He was sleeping." "And you haven't been able to contact him since?" "No, he's not answering his phone. I was locked out of our apartment when I returned." The humiliation of the admission stung even here. The two agents exchanged a look. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance, but it spoke volumes. They already knew. Of course they knew. "We know this is difficult, Mrs. Blackwell." Agent Sterling said, his voice a fraction softer than his partner's, "especially given your condition. But we need you to be honest with us. Your cooperation is very important." "Cooperation? I don't understand what's happening. Is Damien under arrest?" "We'd just like to know about his business," Davies said, sidestepping the question. "You're listed as a board member on several of his companies. Blackwell Capital, Omnicore Holdings, a few offshore entities." Aurora blinked. Yes, that's right. It was a formality, mostly. For tax purposes, Damien said. I sign documents sometimes. Chloe, his assistant, brings them to me. "So you don't have an active role in the day-to-day operations?" "No. Damien handles everything. He's brilliant. I wouldn't even know where to begin to understand the complexity of his work." This was the truth. Her life had been one of curated beauty and social obligations. She planned charity galas, hosted dinners for investors, and traveled with Damien to glittering events around the globe. She was the beautiful, supportive wife, the perfect accessory to his brilliant career. She had never questioned the source of their immense wealth, had never looked too closely at the intricate machinery that powered their lifestyle. It was easier not to. Davies slid a photograph across the table. It was a picture of a man she didn't recognize, a handsome, swarthy man with dark hair and a confident smile. He was on a yacht, the water a brilliant turquoise behind him. "Do you know this man, Mrs. Blackwell?" She shook her head. "No, I've never seen him before." "His name is Alejandro Rivera," Davies said. "He's a prominent businessman from Venezuela, or at least he was. He disappeared 2 months ago. His family believes he was murdered." Aurora stared at the photo, at the smiling face of the dead man. A cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. "What does this have to do with Damien?" "We have reason to believe that Mr. Rivera was one of your husband's investors," Sterling said. "A very significant one. We tracked a payment of over $50 million from a company owned by Rivera to an account controlled by Omnicore Holdings, one of your husband's companies. $50 million. The number was staggering even to her. The money came from a state-owned oil company in Venezuela. Davies continued, his voice low and even. It was part of a much larger sum, over $2 billion, that was embezzled from the Venezuelan government. We believe your husband helped Mr. Rivera and others launder that money through his network of companies, cleaning it and making it disappear into legitimate-looking investments." The room tilted. Launder money. Embezzlement. The words were from movies, from thrilling novels, not from her life. "No," she whispered. "No, that's impossible. Damien is a legitimate businessman. He's respected all over the world. He's on the cover of Forbes. Sometimes the most respected men have the most to hide, Davies said, his gaze unblinking. Your husband's genius isn't just in making money, Mrs. Blackwell. It's in making it move, making it untraceable. He's a ghost in the machine. They questioned her for hours. They asked about their trips, their assets, their friends. They showed her documents, wire transfer confirmations, names of shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands and Panama. It was a language she didn't speak, a world she didn't know existed. With every question, the image of her husband, the man she loved, the father of her child, began to fracture. They asked about a man named Sergei Orlov, a Russian oligarch with known ties to organized crime. Aurora remembered the name. They had entertained him on their yacht in St. Bart's, a loud, boisterous man with a fondness for expensive champagne. Damien had called him a necessary evil. They asked about a trip to Zurich, a quick 24-hour visit that Damien had insisted she accompany him on. He had a meeting at a private bank, he'd said. He'd bought her a Patek Philippe watch while they were there, a ridiculously extravagant gift for such a short trip. Now she wondered what the real purpose of that trip had been. A watch or a deposit? By the time they were done, she was emotionally and physically drained. The foundations of her world had been systematically dismantled. The man she thought she knew was a phantom, a carefully constructed illusion. The life she was living was a lie paid for with stolen money. What now? She asked, her voice hollow. We need to find your husband, Davies said. We believe he knew we were closing in. That's why he's disappeared. That's why he locked you out. He was cutting ties, erasing his life. And you, Mrs. Blackwell, were the biggest part of that life. He was erasing her. The thought was a physical blow. The lockout wasn't about anger or a misunderstanding. It was a calculated act of self-preservation. He had jettisoned her and their unborn child like excess baggage. You're free to go for now, Sterling said, but don't leave the city. We'll be in touch. They didn't offer her a ride back. She was left on the steps of the Federal Building, alone in the heart of the city, with a dead phone, a handful of cash, and a name that was now inextricably linked to a global criminal investigation. The full weight of her situation crashed down on her. She was homeless, pregnant. Her husband was a fugitive, and she was a person of interest to the FBI. She leaned against the cold stone of the building, the laughter of the dead man on the yacht echoing in her ears. The life she had known was over. A new, terrifying one was just beginning. And for the first time, she understood. Damien hadn't just changed the locks on their apartment. He had changed the locks on her entire life and thrown away the key. The days that followed her interview with the FBI bled into a featureless grey blur of fear and dislocation. Aurora found refuge in the anonymous heart of Midtown, in a small extended-stay hotel where the staff was trained to not ask questions as long as the payment was in cash. The room was a suffocatingly small box, smelling of stale air freshener and industrial carpet cleaner. It was a pale, cruel mockery of a home, yet it was the only sanctuary she had. A place to hide. A place to try and think past the roaring in her ears. She spent hours just sitting on the edge of the lumpy bed, one hand resting protectively on her belly, the other clutching her useless phone. Every creak of the elevator in the hallway sent a jolt of panic through her. Every siren on the street below made her jump. She who had moved through the world, insulated by wealth and privilege, was now a fugitive in her own city, hiding from a life that had turned out to be a monstrous lie. The baby would kick a sharp, insistent reminder of the innocent life caught in this vortex, and Aurora would be consumed by a wave of nausea so profound it left her breathless. Her first call was to her parents in their sun-drenched retirement community in Florida. The conversation was one of the most excruciating experiences of her life. She stood by the window looking out at a brick wall, the cheap hotel phone slick with sweat in her hand. "Aurora, honey, what's wrong?" Her mother's voice, usually so bright, was tight with worry. "You sound awful." "How do you tell your golf-loving, bridge-playing parents that their son-in-law, the billionaire whose success they broadcasted at every country club dinner, was a fugitive wanted for international money laundering? How do you explain that their pregnant daughter was homeless and her bank accounts frozen?" It's just a lot right now. Mum." She stumbled the lie, tasting like ash in her mouth. "Damien and we're having some issues, a serious misunderstanding. I'm just taking some space, staying with a friend for a bit." "A misunderstanding? He adores you. What could be so serious?" Her father got on the extension, his voice booming with concern. "Do we need to come up there? I can be on a plane tonight." "No." The refusal was too quick, too sharp. She softened her tone. "No, please. It's something we have to work out ourselves. I needed to hear your voices." Their worried questions, their offers of help crackled with static over the line. Each one a painful reminder of the chasm that had opened between her old life and this new, terrifying reality. She couldn't bear their pity. More than that, she couldn't bear to see the pride in their eyes curdle into disillusionment and fear. After she hung up, she slid down the wall and wept until she had no tears left. Her second call was to a lawyer. Not one of Damien's army of slick corporate attorneys from Skadden Arps, but a name she'd been given by the discreet white-glove referral service her mother had once used during a contentious co-op board dispute. The name was Marcus Thorne, a former federal prosecutor with a reputation for being a brilliant bare-knuckle brawler in the courtroom. Their first meeting took place in his office, a space that was the polar opposite of the cold FBI interrogation room and the sleek, minimalist aesthetic of Damien's world. It was a sanctuary of old-world power, filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, crammed with worn, leather-bound volumes. The air thick with the scent of pipe tobacco and old paper. Marcus Thorne himself was in his late 50s, with a shock of untamable silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed composure. He let her talk. For nearly 2 hours, she told him everything. The lockout, the frozen accounts, the terrifying interview with Agents Davies and Sterling. The story tumbled out of her a torrent of confusion, betrayal and fear. She recounted the names of the shell corporations, the dead Venezuelan, the Russian oligarch. She held nothing back. It was as if a dam had burst, and the polluted waters of her life with Damien came rushing out. Thorne listened with an unnerving stillness, his hands steepled under his chin, his gaze never leaving her face. When she finally fell silent, exhausted, and hollowed out, he remained quiet for a long moment. The only sound, the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. "Well, Mrs. Blackwell," he said, finally his voice a low, gravelly baritone that seemed to resonate with the old wood of the room. "It seems you're in what we, in the legal profession, like to call a world of shit." Despite the crushing gravity of her situation, a small hysterical laugh bubbled up and escaped her lips. The blunt, unvarnished truth of it was almost a relief after days of lies and evasions. "The good news," Thorne continued, a flicker of something that looked like sympathy in his sharp eyes, is that your ignorance is your greatest asset. From everything you've told me, you are a pawn in this game, not a player. The bad news is that the government doesn't like loose ends. They will try to leverage you to pressure you into helping them find your husband. And if you can't, they'll paint you as a willing accomplice, the wife who knew, who looked the other way, while enjoying the fruits of his crimes. The strategy he outlined was twofold. First, they would engage in proactive cooperation. They would seize control of the narrative, framing her not as an accomplice, but as Damien's primary victim. Second, and more importantly, they would launch their own shadow investigation. They needed to find out exactly what Damien had done and where he had gone, not just to protect her, but to find leverage. In a situation like this, Thorne said, leaning forward, information is not just power, it's survival. And so Aurora's life took another surreal turn. She went from planning charity galas at the Met to huddling in the back booth of a dimly lit diner with a private investigator named Sal. Sal was a wiry, caffeine-fueled man with the tired eyes of a former NYPD detective, a man who moved through the city's underbelly with a quiet, seen-it-all confidence. Together they began the painstaking work of piecing together the secret life of Damien Blackwell. The revelations came not in a flood, but as a slow, toxic drip, each new piece of information, another dose of poison to her system. Sal's sources deep within the city's financial and law enforcement communities confirmed the FBI's suspicions, and then some. Damien wasn't just a hedge fund manager. He was a virtuoso of the criminal underworld, a financial wizard who had built a sophisticated global pipeline for cleaning illicit cash. The Chelsea Art Gallery she'd helped him launch, Sal found it was primarily used to sell wildly inflated paintings to shell corporations turning cartel money into legitimate art investments. The cutting-edge tech startup he'd poured millions into A-Front for moving money through a dizzying maze of software licensing agreements. Each discovery was a controlled detonation, blowing another hole in the edifice of her marriage. The man she had admired for his genius was in fact a crook on a scale that defied imagination. But it was the personal revelations that truly shattered her. The most painful blows weren't financial. They were intimate. Sal's investigation uncovered a secret apartment in Soho, a sleek, minimalist bachelor pad leased under a corporate name. When Sal showed the doorman a photo of Aurora, the man just shook his head. No recognition. But when he showed him another photo, one Sal had procured from a security feed at Blackwell Capital, the doorman's face lit up. "Oh yeah, that's Mr. G's girl, Chloe. She's here all the time." Chloe, Damien's hyper-efficient, ever-present personal assistant. The news hit Aurora not with a sound, but with a sudden roaring silence that deafened her to the noise of the diner. Her vision tunneled. It was a betrayal so profound it eclipsed the financial crimes, cutting into the very core of her identity. The affair, Sal discovered through discreet inquiries, had been going on for years. Chloe wasn't just his assistant. She was his partner, the one who managed the day-to-day operations of his shadow empire, the one who prepared the documents Aurora had mindlessly signed, the one whose name Sal eventually found was listed alongside Damien's on several key offshore accounts. Her entire marriage had been a lie. She wasn't his partner. She was his cover story. The perfect, pregnant society wife who provided the veneer of legitimacy, the alibi of domestic bliss that allowed him to operate in the shadows. She thought back to all the late nights, the sudden business trips, the whispered phone calls he'd take in the other room. It wasn't about work. It had been about them. She remembered Chloe's strained, clipped voice on the phone the day of the lockout. "I can't discuss Mr. Blackwell's schedule with you." It wasn't professional discretion. It was the voice of the other woman, the one who was on the inside, the one who was standing beside him as he torched their life. The final devastating twist came from a small, ornate key she found in the back of a forgotten jewelry box. It was for a private safe deposit box at a discreet vault on Madison Avenue. Damien had given it to her years ago, telling her it was for important documents she might need if anything ever happened to him. She'd never thought of it again. Thorne insisted they go immediately. Inside the cool, silent, climate-controlled vault, Aurora's hands trembled as she inserted the key. The heavy steel door swung open to reveal a single, slim, leather-bound folder. Her heart pounded. Inside she found not documents, but photographs, dozens of them. Damien and Chloe laughing on a private yacht in St. Bart's, kissing under the Eiffel Tower, holding hands on a black sand beach in Bali. These weren't business trips. This was their real life, a vibrant, joyful life they had lived in secret parallel to the staid, formal one he performed with Aurora. And then tucked into a flap at the very back of the folder she saw it, a single official document folded in thirds, a birth certificate issued 3 years prior by the state of New York. For a daughter, Lily Chen Blackwell, mother Chloe Chen, father Damien Blackwell. He had another family, a whole other life. A daughter. The steel walls of the vault seemed to press in on her, squeezing the air from her lungs. She sank to the floor, the cold metal a stark contrast to the fire of rage and grief that consumed her. The baby in her womb kicked a sharp, insistent protest against the world of lies he was about to be born into. The puzzle, in all its grotesque horror, was finally complete. She wasn't just the wife he had locked out. She was the second wife, the second family. And her son, the boy he had so eagerly wanted to name Damien Jr., would not be his firstborn heir. He would be the sequel. Damien hadn't just disappeared to escape the FBI. He had run away with his real family. He hadn't just erased her. He had chosen them. She walked out of the vault and into the harsh afternoon light, the birth certificate clutched in her hand like a death sentence. The grief was still there, a raw, gaping wound. But it was now overlaid with something else, something cold and hard and purifying. A resolve that solidified in the pit of her stomach. She was no longer a victim cowering in a cheap hotel room. She was a woman who had been wronged, a mother who would protect her child at any cost. Damien had underestimated her. He had seen her as a beautiful passive accessory to his life. He was about to find out how wrong he was. He had started a war. She was going to finish it. The cold, sterile air of the bank vault was no match for the inferno raging within Aurora. For an hour after finding the birth certificate, she simply sat on the floor, the polished steel of the safe deposit box cool against her back, the single sheet of paper clutched in her hand. The grief that had been her constant companion for days, a heavy, suffocating blanket of sorrow and confusion, had finally been burned away. In its place, something new and terrifyingly clear was forged, a cold, diamond-hard fury. Aurora Blackwell, the gracious hostess, the smiling wife, the woman who worried about floral arrangements and guest lists, was gone. She had been an illusion, just like the marriage she'd treasured. The woman who rose from the floor of that vault was someone else entirely. Her movements were different, no longer tentative, but precise. Her eyes, when she caught her reflection in the polished steel, were not the soft, gentle eyes of the woman she had been. They were the eyes of a predator. She was a mother, with a child to protect, and a woman with nothing left to lose. She walked into Marcus Thorne's office, not with the slumped shoulders of a victim, but with the ramrod straight posture of a general entering a war room. She didn't speak, merely placed the birth certificate on the gleaming surface of his mahogany desk. The paper, so flimsy and innocuous, landed with the weight of a thrown gauntlet. Thorne picked it up, his bushy eyebrows rising as he read. He scanned the names, the dates, the official seal. He looked up at Aurora, at the profound, chilling transformation in her demeanor. A slow, appreciative smile, the smile of a chess master who has just been handed the queen, spread across his face. "He didn't just run from the law," Aurora said, her voice steady, each word a perfectly formed shard of ice. "He ran with his other family. This changes everything." "Yes?" Thorne rumbled, his voice a low, gravelly counterpoint to her sharp clarity. "Yes, it absolutely does." He leaned back in his leather chair, tapping the document thoughtfully. "This is not just a piece of paper, Mrs. Blackwell. This is a weapon, and we are going to aim it at his heart." The entire legal strategy pivoted in that moment. Passive cooperation became a footnote. The new chapter was titled Retribution. In Thorne's office, which now felt less like a legal sanctuary and more like a campaign headquarters, the three of them, Aurora, Thorne, and Sal, the wiry private investigator, mapped out their new offensive. "Damien is a ghost," Thorne stated, pacing before the large window overlooking the city. "He's spent a decade building a life that could be erased in an instant. Trying to find him directly is a fool's errand. He'll have a dozen new identities, a dozen different escape routes. So we don't hunt him." Aurora finished, her mind moving with a speed and clarity that surprised even herself. "We hunt her. Chloe." Sal, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward, a spark in his tired eyes. "The anchor," he said, nodding. "Every ghost has an anchor to the real world, something they can't let go of. A secret kid is one hell of an anchor." Damien had made one critical, arrogant mistake. He had believed Aurora was weak, an ornament that would shatter without him. He never imagined that in severing her from their shared life, he had also freed her from the gilded cage of love, loyalty, and the societal pressure to protect his precious name. She was unchained. Sal was unleashed with a new ferocity and, more importantly, a new and virtually unlimited budget, funded by the emergency accounts Aurora had finally managed to access through Thorne. He delved into Chloe's life, peeling back the layers of her meticulously crafted anonymity. He found her estranged parents in a quiet Sacramento suburb, a high school sister in Seattle who hadn't heard from her in years. He resurrected a deleted food blog Chloe had kept in her early 20s, a digital ghost that provided a psychological profile, meticulous, ambitious, with a taste for the finer things that far outstripped her salary at the time. The trail of digital breadcrumbs led them to a small, exclusive airfield in Teterboro, New Jersey. The records were clean at first. A Gulfstream G650, owned by an anonymous holding company under the Blackwell Capital umbrella, had filed a flight plan for St. Kitts on the morning Aurora was locked out. A common misdirection. But Sal's contact in air traffic control, bribed with a sum that could have bought a new car, revealed the truth. The plane had never descended into the Caribbean. It had switched off its transponder, flying south, far south, a phantom in the sky. All the while, Aurora played her part to perfection. She continued her meetings with Agents Davies and Sterling, her performance worthy of an Oscar. She allowed her voice to tremble, her eyes to fill with a well-rehearsed mixture of sorrow and fear. She gave them everything she and Thorne had uncovered: the art gallery scheme that laundered money through inflated appraisals, the tech company investments that were nothing more than complex wire transfers. She painted a vivid, heartbreaking picture of a wife utterly deceived a woman, manipulated by a sociopathic master criminal. And then in their third meeting, she delivered the master stroke. She slid the birth certificate across the table. The agent's professional masks slipped. Davies swore under his breath. Sterling stared at the document, his jaw tight. It changed the narrative completely. Damien Blackwell was no longer just another rich crook on the run. He was a monster who had committed bigamy in all but name. A man who had callously abandoned his heavily pregnant wife for a secret family. The case became personal. The FBI's resources, previously stretched thin, now focused on him with the intensity of a laser. The final breakthrough came on a rain-slicked Tuesday night. Aurora was in Thorne's office, poring over the contents of the safe deposit box for the 100th time. Sal was about to call it a night, his eyes bleary from staring at satellite maps. "Wait," Aurora said, suddenly picking up the photo of Damien and Chloe in Marrakesh. "Look at her wrist. Zoom in." Sal projected the image onto the large screen on the wall. He enhanced the focus. And there, almost invisible against her skin, was a small, delicate tattoo. It wasn't a symbol. It was a string of numbers. A frantic 10 seconds of typing. The coordinates resolved on the map. A remote wind-swept point on the coast of Chile, an hour south of Zapala. "Gotcha," Sal whispered. He pulled up the latest high-resolution satellite imagery of the coordinates, and there it was, a sprawling, ultra-modern villa of glass and concrete carved into the cliffs overlooking the churning Pacific. It wasn't on any map. Construction had been ruthlessly efficient and recent paid for through a labyrinth of untraceable transactions. They had found his fortress. Aurora felt a surge of triumph so fierce it almost buckled her knees. But it wasn't enough. Handing the location to the FBI felt anticlimactic. She wanted more than his arrest. She needed him to see her. She needed him to know in his final moments of freedom that she was the one who had brought his world crashing down. Thorne, understanding the primal need in her eyes, made it happen. Leveraging the FBI's newfound sympathy for his client, he framed it as a crucial part of the investigation. Aurora, as the key witness and aggrieved party, would accompany them. Her presence, he argued, might be the psychological blow needed to shatter Damien's composure and force a full confession. It was unorthodox, a bureaucratic nightmare, but the story of the abandoned pregnant wife had become legendary within the Bureau. They agreed. The flight to Chile was the most surreal experience of Aurora's life. She sat in a Spartan U.S. government jet a world away from the cashmere throes and champagne service of Damien's Gulf Stream. Surrounded by the quiet, focused energy of federal agents, she flew towards a final confrontation. She was no longer a passenger in her own life. She was in the cockpit, flying straight into the storm. The raid began at dawn. From a mobile command post on a nearby bluff, Aurora watched on a bank of monitors as the operation unfolded. The images were stark, captured by thermal cameras and helmet cams. She saw the sleek black helicopters of the Chilean Special Forces descending like dragonflies, the armed commandos rappelling down the sheer cliff face. It was a silent, swift invasion of the sanctuary Damien had built on a foundation of lies. It was over in minutes. There was no shootout, no dramatic resistance. Damien Blackwell, the master of the universe, was led out in silk pajamas, his hands cuffed behind his back, his face a mask of pure, stunned disbelief. A moment later, Chloe was brought out. Her face, pale and terrified, a small, dark-haired girl clutching her leg, weeping. Aurora felt a fleeting, bitter pang, not of pity, but of a shared, twisted sisterhood. Two women whose lives had been defined and destroyed by the same man. As Damien was being marched towards a waiting helicopter, something made him look up. His eyes scanned the bluff, and then they found her. Across the chasm of grey morning air, their gazes locked. Time seemed to stop. She saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes, then the lightning flash of recognition, followed by a wave of dawning, horrified understanding. He had been so busy watching for the enemy at his front door that he never thought to check his back. He never imagined that the woman he had discarded like yesterday's news would be the architect of his apocalypse. Aurora held his gaze, her expression a blank canvas. Then slowly, deliberately, she placed a hand on the full, round swell of her pregnant belly. It was not a gesture of vulnerability. It was a declaration of war and of victory. "You tried to erase us," the gesture said, "but we are still here, and we are the ones who ended you." The aftermath was a tempest of legal proceedings and media frenzy. Damien's empire imploded. His assets were seized, his name disgraced. He and Chloe faced a litany of charges across multiple continents. The story of the scorned, pregnant billionaire's wife, who orchestrated a global manhunt, was irresistible. Aurora, once a footnote in the society pages, was now a global headline. She retreated, letting Thorn handle the ravenous press. In the quiet solitude she now craved, she gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. She did not name him Damien Jr. She named him Ethan, a name that was strong and whole and entirely her own. In the end, after the lawyers had taken their considerable fees, she was left with a fraction of Damien's fortune, the small portion that Thorn's forensic accountants could prove was untainted. It was more than enough. With a sense of profound relief, she sold everything. The penthouse on Park Avenue, the Hamptons estate, the jewelry, the cars, the art, all the trappings of a life that felt like it had belonged to someone else. She bought a brownstone on a quiet, tree-lined street in Brooklyn. She filled it not with priceless antiques, but with comfortable furniture, the scent of baking bread, and the sound of her son's laughter. She created a new life, a smaller, simpler, and infinitely more real one built on the unshakable bond she shared with her child. One day, a year later, a letter arrived forwarded from Thorn's office. The postmark was from a federal penitentiary. It was from Damien. She almost threw it away, but a flicker of morbid curiosity made her open it. It was a single page filled with his familiar, confident scrawl. He wrote of his deep regret of his undying love of the terrible mistake he had made. He begged for her forgiveness, promising to make everything right when he was released. Aurora read the letter, and then she did something she hadn't done in a very long time. She laughed. A real, deep, genuine laugh that started in her belly and filled her sun-drenched kitchen. He still didn't get it. He still thought she was that woman, the one who could be swayed by empty words and grand, hollow gestures. She walked over to the recycling bin where her son Ethan was happily playing with a set of wooden blocks. She tore the letter into small, satisfying pieces and let them flutter from her fingers. She was finally truly free. The locks had been changed long ago, but now at last, she was the one who held the key. A story of betrayal, resilience, and the incredible strength of a woman scorned. Aurora Blackwell went from a pampered society wife to the architect of a global takedown, proving that hell hath no fury like a woman whose future and the future of her child is threatened. She didn't just get mad. She got even turning the tables on the man who thought he could simply erase her. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest power isn't in wealth or status, but in the courage to fight back when you have nothing left to lose. What did you think of Aurora's ultimate revenge? Let us know in the comments below.
A man at the pinnacle of wealth and power, a wife at home, carrying his child, and a glamorous mistress stealing the spotlight. But what happens when greed and betrayal collide at the very moment new life is meant to be celebrated? In a shocking twist that rocked high society circles, billionaire mogul Victor Harrington chose to whisk his mistress away on a secret baby moon, leaving his pregnant wife, Eleanor, behind. Little did he know that one impulsive decision would unravel a carefully built empire overnight. Brace yourself for a tale of lavish lifestyles, boardroom betrayals, and one pregnant woman's brilliant revenge. Victor Harrington was the kind of man who seemed destined for opulence from birth. Born into a wealthy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, he'd possessed an effortless charm and ambition that made him a force to be reckoned with even before he earned his MBA from Harvard Business School. People close to him said he was unstoppable, a man with the cunning of a Wall Street wolf and the charm of a Hollywood star. He had cut deals in the early days. Alongside mentors who boasted legendary names, he once studied an investment portfolio under Warren Buffett's guidance at a Berkshire Hathaway internship, followed by an immersive executive program at Tesla University, where he brushed shoulders with Elon Musk. By the time he was 30, he had built Harrington Industries into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. By the time he was 40, he was on the prestigious Forbes billionaires list. Eleanor Davenport, soon to be Eleanor Harrington, first met Victor at a charity gala in Manhattan. Although her family was old money, they didn't flaunt it as visibly as the nouveau riche. She was a rising star in the philanthropic world, championing social justice causes, and her quiet grace drew Victor toward her like a magnet. The marriage was a match that made the front page of society magazines, promising to unite two powerful families in a union of wealth, influence, and mutual respect. For a long while, their life was the epitome of gilded harmony. They graced galas, inaugurated libraries, shook hands with political leaders, and jetted off to the French Riviera for impromptu vacations. Their future shone as bright as the diamond on Eleanor's left hand. But even the sturdiest empires can hide cracks. Unbeknownst to Eleanor, cracks were forming behind the scenes at Harrington Industries. Victor had an undeniable appetite for success, for excitement, and for women. When he met Bianca Suarez at a high-level conference in Dubai, it started as an innocent flirtation. She was an emerging media consultant, with her own brand of allure, mysterious, witty, and dangerously ambitious. If anyone had told Victor he was playing with fire, he would have laughed it off. After all, he was Victor Harrington, untouchable, unstoppable. But sometimes the most disastrous events start with just a spark. Over months, lunches turned into dinners, and dinners turned into clandestine weekends in exclusive resorts. Bianca introduced him to the kind of escapades he'd never even allowed himself to dream about before. While Eleanor was 3 months pregnant, carefully nurturing the next heir to the Harrington fortune, Victor found himself dancing intimately with his mistress under the shimmering skyline of Dubai, uncertain whether the rapid beating of his heart was excitement or guilt. Bianca didn't want to be a mere fling. She was calculated. She saw in Victor a chance to climb the social and financial ladder faster than any route she had previously considered. And so she stoked his ego, commiserated with his frustrations, and dangled the promise of secret passions whenever he seemed restless. If it was money and influence she wanted, Victor was more than willing to shower her with lavish gifts. To him, money was just a resource expendable and easily replenished. At first, he believed he could keep this double life separate from the pristine marriage he had built with Eleanor. His logic was twisted, but clear to him. His wife was his anchor, his old money confidant, who maintained his impeccable social standing. The mistress was a wild indulgence. He could afford a carefully contained adventure. He had no intention of hurting Eleanor, or so he told himself. Unfortunately for Victor, the threads keeping this secret under wraps were about to fray. A confidential tip circulated in the narrow corridors of Manhattan's wealthiest cliques. A society blogger posted an unconfirmed rumor about Victor seen dining with a mysterious brunette at a private suite in the Four Seasons Hotel. Most shrugged it off as an everyday hazard of being rich and famous. False rumors swirl constantly around the extremely wealthy. But there was more to this rumor than idle chatter. For the moment, Victor thought he had it all under control. He was a master juggler, wasn't he? Everything would remain neatly balanced until it all came crashing down. As Eleanor's belly swelled with the promise of motherhood, her doctors advised a tranquil holiday to alleviate stress and welcome a sense of peace before the baby arrived. Friends whispered about the latest trend, a baby moon, a final romantic getaway for expecting couples. Eleanor secretly hoped Victor would take her somewhere calm, maybe a resort in the Maldives or a private villa in the Amalfi Coast. The dream of strolling white sandy beaches, holding Victor's hand, and relishing in the final moments of pregnancy, bliss danced in her mind. Victor, however, had a different plan entirely, a plan that was breathtakingly audacious and heartless. He decided to treat Bianca to a baby moon instead, using the ruse of an urgent business summit in Bali. For Victor, it was the ultimate indulgence, combine business with pleasure, while his wife rested at home, unaware that her husband was on the other side of the world, sipping cocktails by a turquoise infinity pool with another woman. He arranged it meticulously. He told Eleanor he was swamped with a high-stakes negotiation in Southeast Asia. Supposedly, several billionaire investors, including a silent partner, rumored to be connected with Bernard Arnault's luxury empire, had demanded an in-person meeting to finalize a partnership. The clock was ticking, he claimed. If he didn't fly out immediately, Harrington Industries risked missing a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. Concerned and weary, Eleanor kissed him goodbye, placing her hand gently over her baby bump and whispering, "Please come home safe." Half a globe away, Victor's private jet landed under the scorching Balinese sun. Bianca, exuding confidence in a linen sundress and designer sunglasses, looked every bit the radiant vacationer. It was a world apart from Eleanor's subdued maternity style back in New York. They settled into an exclusive luxury resort, one that boasted private villas ensconced amid lush tropical forests and infinity pools that seemed to spill into the horizon. To Victor, the staff was discreet, the views unparalleled, and the exclusivity absolute, the perfect setting for a forbidden escapade. But even in paradise, there were signs that things could go wrong. Rumors had circulated that a well-known Hollywood actress was staying at the resort. The paparazzi lurking outside with long-lens cameras were determined to snag any sensational shot. Victor, in his arrogance, paid them no mind. He was too busy enjoying lavish seafood dinners, couples spa treatments, and romantic beachside strolls with Bianca. He reasoned that even if a photograph leaked, he had enough influence to squash it. Money talks, and hush money screams, as he liked to say. What he didn't anticipate was that a local journalist working part-time as a bartender recognized him immediately. The journalist, named Ayu Priyanka, was a savvy freelance reporter. She knew the difference between professional business summit behavior and lovers on a secret holiday. Intrigued, she discreetly snapped a few photographs with her phone, capturing Victor and Bianca laughing over a candle-lit dinner. At first, Ayu weighed the potential consequences. Could these pictures be valuable enough to lead to a groundbreaking story in an international tabloid? Possibly. But first, she needed more solid proof, a narrative that went beyond just two people enjoying a vacation. While Victor reveled in the illusions of a perfect getaway, Eleanor was left to manage her pregnancy in New York, dealing with morning sickness doctor's appointments, and the creeping suspicion that her husband's voice over the phone sounded distant, disconnected. She found herself lying awake at night, staring at the vaulted ceiling of their penthouse, feeling a cold emptiness in their once warm bed. Something was terribly off, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Her mother, Cecilia Davenport, urged her to rest and trust in Victor's dedication to their growing family. After all, he was a busy billionaire. He had always been a bit distant when major deals were on the line. The seeds of betrayal had been planted. If Victor had known the destructive potential of this trip, he might have turned the jet around before it even left the tarmac in New York. But he was blinded by Bianca's enchantments and his own audacity. Each day in Bali heightened his recklessness. He even posted a cryptic Instagram photo of palm trees and a hidden silhouette, an attempt at being clever. Inadvertently, that single post gave watchers enough clues to confirm his exact location. The stage was set for a grand reveal. The baby moon that should have belonged to Eleanor was turning into a ticking time bomb. Sooner or later, a photo or rumor would slip through the cracks, and the moment it did, it would detonate not just Victor's marriage, but potentially the entire foundation of Harrington Industries. In the days following Victor's departure, Eleanor tried to distract herself with philanthropic work. She immersed herself in a high-profile hospital fundraiser hosted at the New York Public Library, the same halls once graced by the likes of Michael Bloomberg and philanthropic luminaries from across the nation. Yet even as she stood at the podium, acknowledging donations and delivering heartfelt speeches, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. It was during one of these fundraisers that Eleanor bumped into her old friend, Serena Marshall, a well-connected socialite and gossip connoisseur. They embraced warmly, then retreated to a corner table where Serena's voice dropped to a whisper. "Ellie, dear, have you heard anything odd about Victor lately?" Eleanor bristled at the tone, feeling a pang of unease. She mustered a soft laugh, trying to brush off any concerns. "Funny you should ask," Eleanor replied. "He's in Bali, urgent business. Hasn't been easy on me, but you know how these deals are." Serena looked at her sympathetically, but her eyes flashed with alarm. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice further. "I heard something from a contact in Singapore. Someone said they saw Victor with a woman named Bianca Suarez, apparently a rising star in media consulting. And they weren't exactly at a boardroom table." Eleanor's heart lurched. She struggled to maintain her composure, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this be a misunderstanding? A smear attempt by a competitor? She had known Victor for years, had believed in his loyalty, though she was aware of his love for excitement. She forced a polite smile, dismissing the rumors. "I'm sure it's some confusion. You know how gossip can get twisted." Serena nodded, but the shadow in her eyes spoke volumes. "Just keep your eyes open, Ellie. If you need help, you know where to find me." That night, alone in her penthouse, Eleanor found her thoughts spiraling. She recalled the nights Victor had come home Late, the hush-hush phone calls, the vague business dinners. She scrolled through social media, scanning for clues, anything to confirm or debunk the rumors. Eventually, she stumbled upon Victor's cryptic Instagram post, palm trees in the background, a silhouette that looked suspiciously feminine. A flood of emotions overtook her. She ran to the bathroom, tears mixing with waves of nausea from her pregnancy. The baby felt her turmoil kicking inside her womb, a reminder of why she had to maintain her composure. Meanwhile, half a world away, Victor's lavish romance continued unabated. He lounged with Bianca in a cabana overlooking the ocean. They talked about launching new philanthropic initiatives, ironically enough, under Bianca's name, funded by Victor's bottomless resources. Bianca was adept at shaping narratives guiding Victor's public image. "Picture this," she said, leaning forward with sparkling eyes. "We frame you as a forward-thinking businessman who invests in youth-oriented media projects across Asia. You'll expand your market reach and look good doing it. I can even help you with the contacts and PR." Victor, enthralled, listened intently. He considered Bianca not just a lover, but a strategic mind who understood branding in a way that could amplify Harrington Industries' global presence. In his mind, he was weaving a dream, a future where he could maintain a public marriage with Eleanor, keep control of his empire, and quietly enjoy a partnership with Bianca that would catapult them both to unprecedented heights. But the cracks in that dream were starting to show. On the third day of their business trip, Victor received a text from one of his board members, Jackson Wolfe, an old friend who had initially introduced him to some of his earliest investors. The text was direct: "Call me. Urgent. Concern about rumors." Victor paled as he read the message. Could it be? But he shrugged it off. Board members worry about everything from stock fluctuation to media gossip. Still, the knot in his stomach tightened. Jackson, however, knew something that Victor didn't. News was spreading in hush-hush financial circles that the Harrington brand was vulnerable. Pioneering investors disliked uncertainty. If the rumors of Victor's scandal went public, it could undermine negotiations, spook shareholders, and create chaos. "Handle it before it blows up," Jackson's text concluded. Yet even that warning didn't shake Victor enough to abandon his tryst. He rationalized that he would handle the fallout once he returned to New York. He was Victor Harrington, after all, a man who had charmed senators out, negotiated cunning tycoons, and turned entire markets on their heads with a single announcement. A rumor or two wouldn't bring him down. Across the ocean, Eleanor was wrestling with growing doubts. She paced the penthouse, replaying every suspicious detail of the past months. Could Victor really be that brazen to take another woman on the very trip meant for them? She didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was mounting. She decided to call an old college acquaintance, Damien Cho, a private investigator who specialized in high-profile cases. "Damien," she began, her voice trembling, I need you to look into something." Discreetly. Eleanor's resolution to seek the truth was the first step toward unraveling Victor's carefully woven tapestry of lies. But it wouldn't stop there. Even she didn't realize yet that once she discovered what was truly happening, her response would be nothing short of a coup, one that would leave Victor's empire trembling at her feet. Damien Cho worked fast. He was an expert in navigating the hidden underbelly of high society scandals. Having once been hired to investigate the suspicious affairs of an actual European prince, this job was par for the course, but it carried a personal element. He knew Eleanor from her days volunteering at a local community center. He respected her warmth, her dedication. And so, when Eleanor asked for his help, he pledged to handle the matter personally. He first followed the breadcrumbs online, examining social media check-ins, cross-referencing flight logs from Teterboro Airport, where Victor often chartered private jets, combing through paparazzi shots of Indonesian resorts. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Damien discreetly messaged contacts in Bali, among them a local stringer for an American tabloid, who confirmed that a wealthy American named Victor Harrington had been spotted with a woman who was decidedly not pregnant. As the puzzle pieces fell into place, Damien's chest tightened with an uneasy sense of foreboding. This wasn't just a case of a random affair. The stakes were colossal. The Harrington name carried weight in corporate boardrooms across the globe, and any scandal could rock markets and ripple through philanthropic circles. The next step was deciding how to deliver the news to Eleanor without breaking her heart entirely. Meanwhile, Eleanor found daily life increasingly difficult. She attended obstetric appointments alone, feigning a smile when the doctor asked about Victor's whereabouts. Her mother noticed the change in her demeanor. "Ellie, darling, you look so tired. Is everything all right?" Eleanor shook her head, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I just need some rest, Mum. I'll be okay." But the moment Cecilia left, Eleanor gave in to sobs, tears that combined heartbreak with a fierce determination. She had a baby to protect, and she would not allow uncertainty to linger. When Damien finally presented his findings, documented photos, flight logs, even a snippet of a conversation recorded by a local resort worker, Eleanor felt both devastation and a strange, cold clarity. She stared at the evidence in stony silence. The man she loved, the father of her unborn child, had chosen to spend precious days in paradise with another woman, parading their affair so openly that it had already begun to leak in social circles. But heartbreak wasn't the only emotion coursing through Eleanor. A sense of betrayal so profound that it threatened to consume her was tempered by the resilience her family had instilled in her. The Davenport lineage was filled with strong, sharp-witted individuals, some who had weathered financial crises, others who had surmounted personal tragedies. Eleanor carried that legacy in her veins. If Victor wanted to toy with her trust, she would answer in a way that made him regret underestimating her. She quietly called her personal attorney, Simone Gold, a formidable woman with an impeccable track record in corporate law. "Simone," Eleanor said softly, "I need to talk about my shares in Harrington Industries and what I might do with them if circumstances change." That phone call set off a chain of events that would reshape the corporate landscape of Harrington Industries. In an ironclad prenuptial agreement, a document Victor insisted on, there was a clause that ironically granted Eleanor a significant stake in the company if Victor ever breached certain moral turpitude conditions. At the time, neither had expected it to be relevant. After all, it was standard protective language in high society marriages to discourage reckless behavior. Now that clause became Eleanor's key to a possible coup. Late one evening, Eleanor sat with Simone in a private library. The scene was fit for a secret conspiracy. Thick velvet drapes, mahogany tables, the faint glow of a Tiffany lamp, illuminating piles of legal documents. "We have everything we need if you choose to proceed," Simone stated calmly. "You can call for a vote of no confidence, leveraging your shares, and then move to replace Victor as CEO if you prove a serious breach of conduct that jeopardizes the company." Eleanor closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. He's not just a cheating husband. He's risking the company's reputation. Investors talk. Stocks drop at the mere hint of scandal. The board might push him out to save their own skins. "I just never thought I'd be the one orchestrating this." Simone placed a reassuring hand on Eleanor's. "From my experience, betrayal often forces us into decisions we never thought we'd make, but the best decisions are those made from strength, not spite. Meanwhile, across the world, Victor was blissfully unaware of the legal storm brewing in New York. His only concern was how to spin the rumors swirling around the resort. Bianca, too, was confident. Over dinner one night, she reassured him. "We can craft a PR statement that says you are networking with me for a series of upcoming deals in Southeast Asia. Bring up philanthropic collaborations in local communities, nobody will suspect a thing." Victor nodded in agreement, grateful for her cunning. It never crossed his mind that back home a pregnant Eleanor was on the brink of executing a swift and devastating plan. Simone's phone calls to board members had already begun under the guise of friendly check-ins. She was gathering allies, stoking concerns about Victor's reliability. The board, always protective of its bottom line, listened closely. After all, a scandal at the top could mean bad press, falling stock, or worse. Piece by piece, Eleanor's revolt was forming. She was no longer the timid, heartbroken wife. She was a future mother who refused to let her child inherit the aftermath of a father's betrayal. If Victor wasn't going to be a responsible partner, she would ensure he couldn't take the company down with him. In less than a week, the stage would be set for an explosive board meeting, one that would pit Eleanor's quiet determination against Victor's flamboyant arrogance. Victor returned to New York in a flurry of self-assured triumph, convinced that he had contained any rumors about his secret affair with Bianca. He strolled into his penthouse, expecting to find Eleanor in a subdued but loving mood. Instead, the apartment was cool-hushed. Even the staff seemed unusually tense. Eleanor was sitting in the living room, sipping tea, her eyes distant. The subtle tension in the air pricked at Victor's confidence, but he masked it with a charming grin. "Darling, I'm home," he announced, setting down his luggage. He reached out to kiss her cheek, but she recoiled, her expression revealing the silent storm within. "Where were you, really?" she asked softly, the tremble in her voice betraying her hurt. For a moment, Victor froze, his mind whirling with excuses. "I told you," he began, forcing composure, "negotiations in Bali. It was stressful, but—" "Stressful," Eleanor interrupted. Her voice rose slightly. "Look at me, Victor." She stood, revealing her swollen belly. "I'm the one who's pregnant with your child alone while you were off entertaining your mistress." Her words reverberated in the elegant living room, echoing amid the hush of the staff. Victor's eyes flickered with panic. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Eleanor, we shouldn't do this in front of—" She cut him off again, the tears in her eyes reflecting both pain and fury. "We shouldn't do this at all, but you left me no choice." With trembling hands, she gathered her coat and purse. "I'll be at my mother's. My attorney will be in touch." Victor felt the world tilt beneath him. "Eleanor, wait. We can talk this through." "You know I'd never—" "I know everything," she hissed, her voice cold as steel. With that, she turned on her heel and walked out, accompanied by 2 discreet bodyguards her mother had insisted she employ. The slamming door reverberated, leaving Victor in a stunned silence that belied the magnitude of the unfolding crisis. The next few days passed in a blur of chaos for Victor. He frantically texted and called Eleanor, but her responses were minimal, formal. She refused to meet alone. Then came the calls from the Harrington Industries board members. A special board meeting had been scheduled for the following week. The stated reason: urgent discussions regarding leadership and corporate strategy. The tone of the calls made Victor's stomach drop. There was no cordial small talk, no easy banter. These were men and women who smelled blood in the water. Desperate, Victor reached out to Bianca for comfort. But even she sensed the shifting currents. "We need a plan," she told him, her face pale with concern. During a hushed dinner in a secluded Michelin star restaurant. You have to get ahead of this. Frame your trip as purely business. Remind them how indispensable you are. Show them your next big project is about to roll out. She offered him PR angles, preparing to rally her media contacts. Yet even Bianca's cunning felt insufficient against the tidal wave Eleanor had set in motion. Behind closed doors, Simone Gold was meeting with Harrington board members, presenting them evidence of Victor's risky behavior and how it jeopardized the company's reputation and future prospects. She skillfully outlined the moral turpitude clause and how it could be invoked to remove him. Meanwhile, Eleanor, hidden away at her mother's estate, tried to steady her emotions and maintain her health for the baby. She found solace in daily visits to her favorite greenhouse on the property, letting the scent of fresh blooms and the vibrancy of life remind her why she was fighting this battle so fiercely. Perhaps the most decisive ally Eleanor gained was Jackson Wolfe, the board member who'd been Victor's close friend. As the scandal threatened to burst into public view, Jackson too found himself cornered by anxious stakeholders and even the press. He'd always admired Victor's brilliance, but he couldn't deny the volatility that was now overshadowing the CEO's leadership. When Eleanor approached him with a personal appeal, asking him to place the company's welfare first, Jackson felt the weight of responsibility. After all, an empire like Harrington Industries didn't revolve around just one man. It had thousands of employees, global partners, and philanthropic obligations. A meltdown at the top could hurt them all. The tension escalated as tabloids began printing speculative articles about Victor's affair. Photos from Bali surfaced online, showing a man who looked suspiciously like Victor Harrington in an intimate embrace with a mystery woman. An onlooker claimed they overheard staff whispering Bianca's name. While some media outlets remained cautious, calling the pictures inconclusive, the digital sphere teemed with rumors. Social media users shared side-by-side comparisons of the man in Bali with official photos of Victor. The avalanche had begun. In an emergency PR move, Victor released a statement through Harrington Industries claiming he had been inspecting potential sites for philanthropic work and that Ms. Bianca Suarez was a consultant assisting in negotiations with local community leaders. The statement was riddled with corporate jargon, and critics pounced on it as an evasive half-truth. The board meeting date approached ominously. Investors whispered about the potential for a shift in leadership. Analysts on financial channels debated the seriousness of the scandal's impact. Share prices wavered slightly, but enough to create nervous chatter. All the while, Victor felt increasingly trapped, his once indomitable confidence shaken to the core. Somewhere behind the scenes, Eleanor steeled herself. She placed a hand on her baby bump, remembering why she needed to see this through. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about securing a future for her child, free from the looming shadow of a father who believed he could treat people as pawns in his personal game. She wanted to protect the legacy that her baby would one day inherit, ensuring it wasn't poisoned by Victor's self-serving choices. When the morning of the board meeting finally arrived, Manhattan buzzed with anticipation. Black SUVs lined up outside Harrington Tower. News vans prowled the streets, hoping for a glimpse of either Victor or Eleanor. Inside the building's executive conference room, the fate of one of the city's most powerful men hung in the balance. And unbeknownst to Victor, Eleanor had spent countless hours meticulously preparing for this moment. On an unseasonably cold spring morning, the towering glass facade of Harrington Tower reflected a bleak, steel-gray sky. Inside the executive conference room on the 59th floor, a series of tense discussions filled the air. Board members took their seats around a polished mahogany table. At the head sat an imposing leather chair reserved for the CEO, a seat that Victor Harrington assumed was unequivocally his. But as the clock neared 9 a.m., the tension in the room crackled with electric intensity. Victor entered shoulders squared, hair meticulously styled, wearing a custom-tailored suit. He exuded the aura of a man used to control, but a subtle flicker in his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Next to him walked Bianca, meticulously groomed in a business outfit, ready to spin narratives. Her presence alone raised eyebrows. Traditionally, only top executives or board-invited advisors attended these pivotal meetings. Bianca, however, was neither. Whispers erupted as board members exchanged curious looks. At precisely 9 a.m., the doors swung open again. Eleanor stepped inside, supported by her attorney, Simone Gold. Wearing a subdued black dress that discreetly draped her pregnant figure, she moved with quiet, composed determination. A hush fell over the room. Heads turned, and even Victor's practiced poise faltered for an instant. This was the first time he'd seen his wife since she had walked out of the penthouse. She acknowledged the board members with a polite nod, her gaze not lingering too long on Victor. No one missed the significance of her presence, especially because she was still a major shareholder with seats on the board that her Davenport family connections had secured. Simone took a seat beside Eleanor, placing a leather briefcase on the table, the metal clasps glinting under fluorescent lights. The board chair, an elderly statesman named Arthur Norwood, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for attending this extraordinary session. We have urgent matters to discuss regarding Harrington Industries' leadership vision and recent developments in the public sphere." His gaze darted from Victor to Eleanor and back again. "This is a confidential meeting, so I expect the utmost discretion." Victor tried to seize the initiative. Standing, he projected his confident, booming voice. "Before we begin, let me address the swirling rumors. There have been malicious reports in the press about my personal life. I want to assure everyone here that these allegations are blown out of proportion. My trip to Bali was primarily for philanthropic site inspections and negotiations with prospective investors." He gestured toward Bianca. "Ms. Suarez has been an instrumental media consultant, helping me navigate international expansions and philanthropic strategies." Bianca stepped forward, her tone crisp and professional. "I understand the concerns, but I assure you, my partnership with Mr. Harrington is strictly business. We've been discussing a large-scale youth media initiative." Eleanor, calm yet resolute, interrupted. "That's enough." She rose slowly, one hand resting protectively on her belly. Her voice was steady, resonant with an inner strength. "We're all aware of the photographic evidence. We know the media stories aren't mere fabrications, but the real issue here isn't just a personal indiscretion. It's the risk posed to this company, our company, by this scandal." She glanced around the table, meeting each board member's gaze. "I have proof of how negotiations with certain Asian partners have been compromised by the negative press. Investor confidence is wavering. And this is on top of the moral turpitude clause in Victor's contract." A stunned silence followed. Moral turpitude clauses were rarely mentioned in corporate contexts, but in high-profile marriages that intersected with business holdings, they were sometimes used to protect the company from the detrimental actions of a key figure. Victor's face paled momentarily. He cast a sharp look at Simone, recalling the prenuptial agreement's fine print that he once dismissed as boilerplate. She returned his stare with icy composure. Arthur Norwood cleared his throat again. "Mrs. Harrington, can you elaborate on the severity of these repercussions?" Simone clicked open her briefcase and pulled out neatly organized documents. Board members here you'll find data illustrating recent dips in stock value following the barley scandal leaks. This is paired with the explicit language in the moral turpitude clause that Mr. Harrington personally signed. If certain actions, infidelity-damaging public scandals, put the company at risk, shareholders have the right to demand a revaluation of leadership. Victor jumped to his feet, voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. This is outrageous. You're using our personal issues to stage a corporate coup. You can't do this. Jackson Wolfe spoke up, surprising Victor with the quiet resolve in his voice. Victor, your name may be on the building, but you're not the sole owner. We all have to safeguard Harrington Industries. The press is already circling. If we lose key investors because of your personal mistakes, thousands of jobs could be at risk, not to mention our philanthropic commitments. He paused, avoiding Victor's gaze. I'm sorry, old friend, but business is business. The tension reached a fever pitch as a motion was placed on the table. Eleanor, supported by her block of shares and quietly backed by the Davenport family's significant influence, made a formal request for a vote of no confidence in Victor Harrington as CEO. Typically, such measures took weeks to arrange. But the moral turpitude clause, combined with the urgent crisis, allowed an immediate consideration. It was unprecedented, but legal. Victor and Bianca watched in mounting horror as the votes were cast. Old alliances turned shaky. Some board members, who once owed their positions to Victor, now weighed their own survival. The result wasn't even close. A majority sided with Eleanor and Simone's proposal. The motion carried, effectively ousting Victor from the CEO position pending further negotiations regarding his stake and role in the company. Eleanor looked across the table, her eyes moist with a blend of triumph and heartbreak. Victor, I never wanted it to come to this, she said quietly, but you forced my hand. Stunned into silence, Victor sank into his chair. Bianca tried to speak, to offer a rebuttal or spin, but her words faltered in the face of the board's overwhelming consensus. The meeting concluded with a swirl of legal procedures. A caretaker CEO would be appointed, with an emergency leadership council to manage day-to-day operations, while a permanent replacement was sought. For all intents and purposes, Victor's reign was over. As people gathered their folders and prepared to leave, an ominous hush filled the room. The downfall of a once mighty empire head had played out in a mere hour. Eleanor, gathering her strength, exited without another word, Simone at her side. In the hallway, the press buzzed, cameras flashing. But Eleanor walked past them, a silent force of composure, stepping into a waiting car that whisked her away. Inside that car, she finally allowed herself to exhale. She gently placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby's light kick. A swirl of conflicting emotions flooded her: sorrow, relief, fury, and the faint hope that maybe now the child she carried could one day grow into a legacy untainted by reckless betrayal. Victor had taken a mistress on a baby moon that should have been theirs, but in that betrayal, he had also handed Eleanor the keys to the kingdom. The world of high finance reacted swiftly to the seismic shift at Harrington Industries. Within hours, the news had spread, from private trading floors in Hong Kong to business lunches in London. Major outlets like the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times dedicated front-page headlines to Victor Harrington's sudden ouster, speculating on the behind-the-scenes drama that led to it. Business analysts on CNBC questioned whether Harrington Industries could maintain its momentum without the larger-than-life charisma of its founder. But in hushed corners of society events and exclusive clubs, the whispers focused on the scandal's personal dimension. Everyone knew that Victor had been unseated, not just by the board, but by the very wife he betrayed while she was pregnant with his child. The story was salacious enough to feed tabloids for weeks, but it also showcased Eleanor's business acumen and unyielding resolve. Where once people saw her as simply Victor's gracious spouse, they now recognized a formidable woman who had deftly used a moral turpitude clause to protect herself and the company. Victor retreated to a penthouse suite at the Carlisle Hotel, a discreet refuge for the city's affluent seeking privacy amid turmoil. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from attorneys, PR managers, and concerned allies. But not all calls were sympathetic. Some were angry investors demanding explanations, and others were from tabloids offering extravagant sums for exclusive interviews. Victor ignored most of them, drowning his sorrows in half-empty whiskey glasses. Bianca hovered around him, attempting to console him. Yet her once firm confidence now wavered as she faced the repercussions of being publicly named as the mistress. Gossip columns buzzed with her name, some labeling her a gold digger, who had orchestrated the entire fiasco to boost her media profile. Even legitimate media platforms questioned her credentials, doubting her role as a bona fide consultant. The brand she'd painstakingly built threatened to crumble, and the high-profile connections she once courted grew wary of associating with scandal. She tried to assure Victor that they still had each other, and that it was only a matter of time before they bounced back. But in the pit of his despair, her words rang hollow. Meanwhile, behind the imposing walls of the Davenport estate, Eleanor found herself grappling with mixed emotions. She had succeeded in removing Victor from the company leadership, but the personal cost weighed heavily on her. She was married to a man whose betrayal had shattered her trust. For nights on end, she lay awake, feeling the baby's gentle movements and wondering what kind of future they would have. She consulted with Simone about legal separation, maybe even divorce, but each time she hesitated, mindful of the unborn child who would inevitably link her life to Victor's in some way. While Eleanor wrestled with internal conflicts, corporate maneuvers continued at Harrington Industries. The newly appointed caretaker CEO, Lawrence Porter, a veteran executive from within the company, diligently tried to stabilize investor sentiment. He reached out to longtime partners, reminding them of the company's resilient fundamentals and diversified portfolio. But the stock still dipped further, reflecting the market's anxiety. Even seasoned analysts couldn't discount the intangible influence Victor once held. Lawrence, however, had Eleanor's backing, and Jackson Wolfe's strategic insight. Their combined efforts formed a temporary shield against a total collapse in confidence. In an attempt to turn the tide, Simone advised Eleanor to take a more visible role. "You don't have to be CEO, but your presence will reassure investors," she said gently. "Host a small event. Show your commitment to the company. Let them see that the Harrington brand is intact, anchored by someone with integrity." Eleanor was reluctant, but she recognized the necessity. Against her natural inclination for privacy, she agreed to hold a press conference to address the company's future. Titled "A New Horizon for Harrington Industries," it was carefully orchestrated, tasteful floral arrangements, minimal fanfare, and a succinct message of stability, progress, and renewed commitment to philanthropy. Eleanor spoke for only 10 minutes, but her measured tone and composed demeanor impressed even the cynics. She reiterated the strength of the firm's core businesses and announced a series of philanthropic initiatives focusing on maternal health, an unsubtle nod to her own journey. By the end, the stock saw a modest uptick, a sign that perhaps the market believed Harrington Industries could weather the storm after all. Yet beneath the public facade of a carefully managed transition lay personal entanglements that were far from resolved. Victor watched Eleanor's press conference in his hotel suite, a feeling of muted awe stirring inside him. There she was, the woman he had wronged gracefully, commanding respect from an audience of seasoned journalists and business leaders. He couldn't help but feel a pang of regret, if not for his actions, then for his hubris that had led him here. One evening, as he swirled whiskey in a crystal tumbler, he found his thoughts drifting uncomfortably to the future. Would Eleanor proceed with a divorce? What about the baby? Would he have a place in his child's life? After everything that happened, he knew he had to attempt to fix things, at least in part. Taking a deep breath, he dialed Eleanor's number for the first time since the board meeting. The phone rang and rang until her voicemail picked up. Victor hesitated, then left a quiet message. Eleanor, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but we need to talk about everything, especially the baby. I'm sorry. He wasn't sure if he expected a reply, but he knew there was no easy path forward without at least confronting the reality of the child they both were responsible for. Outside the Carlyle's windows, the city glistened under a canopy of lights. For the first time in years, Victor Harrington, once the master of the universe, felt entirely unsure of what lay ahead. A week after the historic boardroom coup, Eleanor sat in her mother's sunlit conservatory. Hothouse orchids of every hue framed the glass walls, their vibrant blossoms reminding her that life continued to flourish even in the face of strife. She absent-mindedly rubbed her baby bump, reflecting on the swirl of events that had consumed her life. She was no longer just a wife. She was a major shareholder who had pulled the strings to unseat a billionaire mogul. Yet behind the newfound respect people afforded her lay an ache of betrayal that no corporate victory could mend. Her phone buzzed. Checking it, she found a message from Victor. Please, let's talk. We owe it to ourselves and our child. Eleanor stared at the words, her heart pounding. After everything that had happened, could she face him? But she also knew that ignoring him forever wasn't an option. They had a child to consider, a future that demanded clarity, if not reconciliation. She typed a brief reply, "Tomorrow noon, the Davenport estate. Bring your attorney." It was a formal invitation, suggesting a calm, structured environment. If they were to negotiate the boundaries of their future, the setting would be one Eleanor controlled. Victor arrived the next day wearing a subdued suit that lacked his usual flashiness. Accompanying him was his personal lawyer, a soft-spoken man who looked uncomfortable from the moment they stepped onto the immaculately trimmed lawns. Eleanor greeted them in the estate's library, flanked by Simone Gold. Polite nods were exchanged, but the tension was palpable. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," Victor began, clearing his throat. His voice was subdued, none of the brash confidence that once defined him. "I know I've caused you unbelievable pain, and I'm truly sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to ensure that I'm still part of our child's life." Eleanor studied him, trying to reconcile the man she'd once loved with the broken figure before her. "You made a choice, Victor, more than one choice, over and over, to lie to me. You destroyed the trust we had. But yes, you're still the father of this child." Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. "I won't deny you the chance to be in our baby's life if you can prove you'll be a responsible parent." Simone nudged a folder across the polished table. "We have some proposed terms," she explained. "For co-parenting, child support, and possibly spousal support, should Eleanor decide to file for divorce. It's all preliminary, but it provides a framework." Victor shot a quick glance at his attorney, who nodded as he skimmed the documents. Before he could respond, Eleanor raised a hand. But let's be clear. I expect honesty from here on out. Any more deceptions, financial or personal, and you'll lose access. Is that understood? Swallowing hard. Victor nodded. I understand. They navigated the intricacies of child support and visitation schedules with the same formality one would use to negotiate a business deal. Simone outlined how they'd handle expenses related to education, healthcare, and even a trust fund for the child's future. Despite the emotional undercurrent, the conversation remained measured, proving that both parties were resolute in doing what was best for the baby. Outside, the day had turned overcast clouds gathering like silent witnesses to this fateful meeting. When all the legal points had been addressed, an uneasy silence fell. Victor turned to Eleanor, voice trembling with something akin to remorse. I know a contract can't fix this, but maybe with time. Eleanor's expression was soft, yet cautious. I don't know if we can rebuild trust, Victor. Right now, my focus is on our child and on stabilizing Harrington Industries. I won't forgive what you did, at least not yet. But for the baby's sake, I'm willing to keep the door to communication open. Victor sighed, relief and sorrow mingling in his eyes. Thank you. That means more than you know. After they finished, Simone escorted Victor and his lawyer to the door. Eleanor stayed behind, still seated at the heavy wooden table. The moment the door clicked shut, she buried her face in her hands. A quiet sob, breaking through the composure she'd clung to all afternoon. The meeting felt like the formal dissolution of the life she once cherished and the birth of a tentative new arrangement dictated by lawyers and heartbreak. Outside, Victor paused under the estate's grand archway, looking back at the stately manor. He felt an immense sense of loss, of Eleanor, of the carefree world he once believed was his by right. All that remained was the flicker of hope that he might still salvage some shred of dignity or at least fatherhood from the wreckage. As the sun began to set, both of them were left contemplating the precarious path ahead. For Eleanor, there was the daunting task of balancing her new role in the company, impending motherhood, and the emotional toll of Victor's betrayal. For Victor, a future unspooled that no longer revolved around his unchecked desires. The affair with Bianca had scorched the once verdant life he enjoyed, leaving him to rebuild on whatever scorched earth remained. And standing at the epicenter of it all was a child not yet born, but already shaping the decisions and destinies of the two people who had brought them into this world. 2 months after the boardroom coup, Harrington Industries began to steady under interim CEO Lawrence Porter and Eleanor's quiet but guiding influence. Investor confidence, once shaken, showed signs of recovery. Eleanor, though not officially at the helm, became the moral compass the company sorely needed. Her focus shifted toward green energy in Southeast Asia and philanthropic programs in education and maternal health causes that echoed her personal transformation. While the board rallied behind her strategic insights, Eleanor embraced the final stages of pregnancy in the comfort of the Davenport estate. She and her mother Cecilia carefully prepared the nursery. The estate, adorned with family portraits and fresh blooms, became a sanctuary of reflection and resolve. Eleanor found a strange comfort in her new dual identity, mother-to-be and corporate architect. Victor, meanwhile, lived in quiet exile at the Carlisle Hotel, a far cry from the boardroom he once ruled. He made half-hearted attempts to salvage his image, TV interviews, vague apologies, even an anonymous donation to one of Eleanor's maternal health projects. But the public had moved on. Bianca Suarez had all but disappeared, reportedly in Europe, rebranding her image. Their affair, once blazing with scandal, faded into footnotes in tabloids. Victor's fall was complete. His public charm now rang hollow in empty rooms. Despite all, he still hoped to be part of his unborn child's life. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, he left Eleanor a voicemail. "We need to talk. About the baby, I'm sorry." When Eleanor heard the message, she hesitated, but she knew this conversation was inevitable. Her reply was short and firm. "Tomorrow, noon. Here, bring your attorney." The next day, Victor arrived at the Davenport estate, subdued, accompanied by a lawyer who looked as uncomfortable as the situation warranted. In the library, Simone Gold stood by Eleanor's side, and together they laid out terms, co-parenting, financial responsibilities, and strict boundaries. "I won't deny you access," Eleanor said, her tone even. "But if there's any dishonesty, any more games, you'll lose that right." Victor nodded solemnly. "I understand." They negotiated like business partners rather than former lovers. Once the legal matters were handled, an awkward silence lingered. "Maybe," Victor said, voice low with time. "I'm not ready to talk about forgiveness," Eleanor replied, "but for our child's sake, I'll keep the door open." Weeks later, as autumn deepened, Eleanor went into labor earlier than expected. In the pre-dawn hours, amidst the sterile light of a hospital room, she gave birth to a baby boy. Tears filled her eyes as she held him. "Welcome to the world," she whispered, her voice breaking. Victor arrived hours later. She could have turned him away, but didn't. He entered quietly, awestruck by the sight of their son. "He's perfect," he murmured, his hands trembling as he cradled the child. Eleanor watched, uncertain but composed. Despite everything, their son deserved a future rooted in peace, not bitterness. That moment of shared awe, the only one since their world, fractured, offered a flicker of fragile possibility. The scandal had toppled a billionaire, empowered a betrayed woman, and birthed a new legacy. In this dawn-lit hospital room, the next chapter was just beginning. Thank you for joining me on this tumultuous journey of passion, power, and redemption. From a secret Bali getaway that sparked rumors in the tabloids to a dramatic boardroom coup that shook Harrington Industries, we've witnessed how betrayal and ambition can unravel even the mightiest of empires. Yet in the end, we've also seen how strength, dignity, and a fierce sense of purpose can guide us through the darkest storms. Eleanor emerged not just as a scorned wife, but as a formidable force, one who safeguarded an entire company while preparing to welcome new life into the world. If you were swept up in the twists and turns of this real-life drama novel, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you tales that inspire intrigue and entertain. Thank you for watching.